Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, Sanjoy Roy, and all of us at Teamwork Arts, I welcome you to this session of JLF Words Are Bridges, to walk alone in the crowd. JLF Words Are Bridges celebrates the indomitable spirit, diversity, and richness of languages, Indian and international. In this series, we showcase an original work, the translation of the same, and an insight into the author's unique world. This series reinforces our vision to ensure the free flow of knowledge, information, and ideas. We present to you today To Walk Alone in the Crowd, Antonio Muñoz Molina in conversation with Maneesha Taneja. Award-winning Spanish writer Antonio Muñoz Molina's novel, Un andar solitario entre la gente, recently translated into English as To Walk Alone in the Crowd, is an absorbing part memoir, part novel, and part chronicle of urban wandering. Deeply rooted in nostalgia of the mundane yet extraordinary, Molina's narrative is a skillful take on contemporary life and the profundity of the digital and concrete jungles around us. His other novels include In the Night of Time, Sephiroth, and Like a Fading Shadow. In conversation with academic and author Maneesha Taneja, Molina gives us a peek into his writing style and the ecological and aesthetic inspirations behind his most recent work. Introducing our speakers for today. Antonio Muñoz Molina is the author of more than 30 books, most of them novels, but also essays, memoirs, and collections of essays. He was the recipient of the Jerusalem Prize in 2013. His novel, Like a Fading Shadow, was shortlisted by the Man Booker for the Man Booker International Prize in 2018. The following one, To Walk Alone in the Crowd, was awarded the Prix Médicis Étranger in France last year. He lives in Madrid and Lisbon and is married to fellow writer Elvira Lindo. Maneesha Taneja, an alumnus of Jawaharlal Nehru University, teaches Spanish in Delhi University and translates between Spanish, English, and Hindi. Her noteworthy translations include Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, Pablo Neruda's memoirs into Hindi from Spanish, and Nadine Gordimer's collection of short stories, all three of them Nobel winners. Her recent translation of Amitav Ghosh's Gun Island has received much critical acclaim. This session is presented in partnership with Instituto Cervantes, New Delhi. And before we start the session, may I please invite Oscar Pujol, Director, Instituto Cervantes, to say a few words.
Hi, greetings from the Instituto Cervantes in New Delhi. It is a joy for me to introduce these 3 sessions on contemporary Spanish writers on the virtual platform of the Jaipur Literature Festival, Words Are Bridges. I want to thank the directors of the festival, Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and Sanjoy Roy, for having the insight to invite to the festival these who are among the best in Spanish today's literature. Antonio Muñoz Molina is a full member of the Royal Spanish Academy, and he has received some of the most important literary awards in the Spanish-speaking world: Spain's National Narrative Prize, the Premio Planeta, and the Prince of Asturias Award for Literature. He became known in 1986 with his novel Beatus Ille, translated into English as A Manuscript of Ashes. Other of his novels translated into English are Prince of Shadows, Sephiroth, and In the Night of Time. He is known for the depth and brilliance with which he has narrated crucial episodes of the contemporary world and significant aspects of his personal experience. His work admirably assumes the condition of the intellectual committed to his time. So, do enjoy some of the best writers of contemporary Spain, brought to you by the Jaipur Literature Festival and the Instituto Cervantes. Thanks very much, muchas gracias y hasta la vista.
Thank you, Oscar, and the entire office of Instituto Cervantes for their support towards the festival. And without further ado, I would like to welcome our wonderful speakers for today. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you, To Walk Alone in the Crowd, Antonio Muñoz Molina, in conversation with Maneesha Taneja. Maneesha, over to you.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be back at the JLF after some time and at the same platform that I was here a while ago. Today, I am going to talk to, as Judith just said, to Antonio Muñoz Molina, a Spanish writer. And when I wrote to him my reaction after having read the book, I told him that it unsettled me. I enjoyed it, but it unsettled me. It unsettled me a lot because it showed us a mirror to what we are as a society. It is a collage, actually, of various things, of subway advertisements, commercials, overheard conversations, news headlines, and a writing that is, just flows from one thing into another. It's only in the beginning, it just seems like cacophony. It is slowly that it settles down into an order and you start enjoying the book. It is a catalogue of flaneurs walking amongst the noise of this modern world. The narrator occasionally breaks out into a verse. There is, cataloging terrorist attacks, their deadly accidents, their political barbs also at Donald Trump a lot. And, it's all there in this novel, which settles into a structure slowly over the pages. It's a huge novel, and it took some time to read it and fall in love with it also, but it also unsettled me. Mr. Molina, the one thing that struck me was that, the flaneur, because what we know of a flaneur is a man who's, observes the city, who just walks through it and just writes down his observations. But your protagonist is a man which alternates between nostalgia and anxiety. He's critical, and unlike the gaze of a flaneur, he's predisposed to hunt moments. He's on the lookout for moments. And that for me was a contradiction of sort over here.
Why was that a contradiction?
Because I had, from my understanding of the flaneur, was that they just observed. But over here, I felt that they just walked through and whatever came their way. It didn't really seem all that, let us say, unorganized over here. It was a strategy.
Well, everything started by chance. No, I didn't plan to write a book about that. In fact, I was writing another novel. I was in the process of finishing another novel. And then what happened was that I started paying attention to everything that surrounded me out on the street. No, I started to paying attention to the things that we get through, but never somehow acknowledge. No, I started to pay careful attention to everything, to the ads, to the publicity, to commercials, to the things people were talking about when on the subway or on the bus. No, and I started jotting down everything I heard or everything I saw in these ads and these screens and everything. No, so I started to realize that there was a noise in the city, and that I very much wanted to convey the feeling of being out in the city, of listening to this cacophony, as you said, no, listening to all this noise, no, and I started to realize that even though there were many very different voices talking to you all the time since the moment you went out, no, there was a kind of harmony. There was like a structure, no. It was the structure of the voices inviting you, No, the voices inviting you to buy things, no, to visit things, to discover things, no. And I found out that it was that all these voices of commercials, of publicity, were speaking to you personally, were addressing you personally in the language of seduction, of poetry. No? So it came as a surprise to me. No, I didn't intend to write the book. I started simply jotting down things, and things started to develop into a narrative. No, and then what came back to me was this idea of not exactly of the flaneur, but the writers, the actual writers who have invented the literature of the city. No, starting by the Quincy. No, who has always been a particular love of mine. No, so. I discovered that there was a kind of genealogy, a concrete genealogy. I mean, De Quincey was the first one who wrote about being lost in a modern city, no? In the Confession of the Opium Eater. But the interesting thing is that De Quincey was read by Allan Poe in New York, no? In America, no? And Allan Poe created one of the first narratives where the city is the actual and only protagonist, no? The man in the crowd. But there is something else, another step forward. And it is that Baudelaire in France translated into French both De Quincey and Poe, no? And later on in the 20th century, Walter Benjamin in Berlin and then in Paris translated Baudelaire. So you see, there is a kind of lineage, no, going through the 19th and the 20th century, and I felt myself as part of this genealogy. I've kind of, it was like a wandering Jew, you know. I was.
You mentioned right now that going through the 19th and the 20th century, but which takes me to a question which immediately comes to my mind is the title from Quevedo's sonnet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
so, because that is from the 17th century.
Yeah, but you know what is striking? You know what is striking? That this line in Quevedo's sonnets always struck me as something contemporary, because you can imagine Quevedo lived in Madrid, which at the time was a very small city. It was impossible to get lost in the city. But there is something else even more interesting. And it is the fact that Quevedo has lifted this line from Luis de Camões, from a sonnet by Camões.
Okay, so therefore it comes around.
So it comes around. Now you see that this line going on and on through the centuries, no? And that's why in the novel there is a character which is practically the only imaginary character, who is this nameless person whom I meet in Madrid and then in New York. No, so my idea was to figure out this permanent walking in the city through ages, through centuries, through different cities, because I walk in New York, in Lisbon, in Paris. No, it's like being the wandering Jew, as I said earlier. It was fun. It was fun to feel yourself part of this tradition. No?
So how did this whole idea of the writers becoming a part of the novel happen? Was that a conscious decision, or that happened by and by?
It happened by and by. This book was born in a very unexpected way, and I was making it up as I went along, you know, because I was somehow stunned by the things I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just went on, no? And I had this hope that eventually some kind of structure will reveal itself, no?
So the structure revealed itself after you got everything together, or did you start editing midway and thought that now this is too much?
Well, I was completely lost, you know. I tried to find a beginning, to find a music, you know, there is something that has happened in me as a writer, a kind of evolution since I was young. No? When I was much younger, I had this idea of a novel as a perfect plot, like a sonnet, like a murder mystery.
Yeah.
My masters were Henry James and Borges and Flaubert, and you have this beautiful idea of a perfect construction. But then, by and by, I started to discover another temptation, the idea of trying to find my way while I went along, try to fumble my way around. And this happened when I was writing this, because I thought that I didn't need a plan. The only thing I needed was this certainty of doing something I felt passionately about.
Okay. And that is the city, right?
Yeah, and the city, and some things that were slowly when coming up front, the obsession, for example, about garbage.
Yes,
Garbage
I was
and
coming
trash
to the garbage.
and refuse.
Yes.
And collage, because everything has to do with the collage.
Yeah.
The moment you pay attention to the city and to the contemporary world, what you see is that we are always buying and discarding things. This is a society based on the discarding of things, of throwing things away, of using a plastic bag for 5 minutes and throwing it away, and it will last for 1,000 years. So
that is why you paint this modern world through this collage of garbage that you do.
Yeah. Since we live in a world made out of garbage, in order to represent, in order to figure out a vision of this world, you have to use the materials that come more easily at hand, which is garbage, refuse, detritus.
So to go back a little bit to what you said about advertisement and it being the seductive language that it is in modern world, and I'm now going to take it a little further to the garbage that you just mentioned, because this advertisement is actually which generates a lot of the garbage as well. It entices us to shop and then throw and then shop some more. And I noticed that every section of the novel starts with one advertisement, the punchline or the line of the novel.
Yes.
So that was the structure that you thought of for the novel, or it was because of the seduction that language is offering?
Well, I found out that it was a pattern. It might work as a pattern,
Okay.
In order to give an overall plan to the story, When you are working on a book like this, you need on the one hand, you need to convey the sense of disorder and improvisation, But at the same time, on the other hand, you have very clearly to create a form, something for the book to stand on. Otherwise, it falls apart. So it maybe it has fallen apart. You never know. No?
I don't think so.
but I mean, with words, punchlines and ads and everything, these are like verbal garbage.
Yeah.
So you see, I became obsessed with the kind of beautiful nonsense in commercials, in publicity panels in the city.
If I can quote just a little bit, the text says, I switch on the voice recorder to repeat something I've read. I press stop, but a moment later, I have to switch it on again. Give blood. We buy gold. The signs along the sidewalk gradually fall into a cadence. We buy silver and gold. Give life. So this is exactly what you are saying right now.
Yeah. For example, that in New York, there is something that you see everywhere in the subway, and it says, if you see something, say something. And it came out at the time of the September 11th attacks,
Attacks, yeah.
But then this is something that you see everywhere and don't pay much attention to it. But in fact, when you go back to it and you pay attention, you find how full of potential it is. No, if you see something, say something. This is like an invitation to write. This is what writing a book is about. No, you see something, you say something.
That is true. But at the same time, these advertisements are also a distraction from the problems that face us. Because, when I was reading the book, it seemed to echo T.S. Eliot, when he says, we moderns are distracted by distraction, distraction.
That line, that T.S. Eliot line is fundamental for me. Distracted by distraction, from distraction by distraction.
By distraction.
No? Yeah.
And that is what keeps happening in the novel as well. As I see one thing and the other thing and the other thing, and you forget the previous one and go to the next problem.
Yeah, you are telling a story, but then something comes in. It's like when you are watching a YouTube video, no?
Yes, you watch a clip and then the next clip is there.
So I had to put everything in, because I had to convey this sense of confusion, this sense of being, as you say, distracted to death. You're walking down the street and there are so many screens, with images in motion, with beautiful, and some of these ads, some of these commercials are very, very intense and very well told stories. That's why some of the chapters in the book are the narration of an ad, of a commercial. There was a beautiful commercial I saw many times, which is about this woman with a red dress, who walks along the street and everything turns red. The sidewalk, everything turns red, because this is an ad for lipstick, for red lipstick. So you see, there is poetry there.
Yeah.
This is a kind of corrupt poetry, because they are selling you, because this is a shameless way of selling you things.
That's true. So the other thing that I notice is, that the authors that you mentioned, of course, they're brilliant, but they're also they were, let us say, lonely travelers. And it is as if you are giving them company.
Yeah.
And it's like you're walking with them, with their ghost, towards taking them to where you want to take them.
Yeah. You know what? They are, for me, they don't represent this idea of the flaneur as someone who is simply like a tourist, who is simply taking in things but staying apart. These people, all of them represent for me the very difficult place of the artist in the commercial world. All of them had a very difficult lives.
Yes.
All of them were extremely smart, but none of them ever got a steady job. I mean,
they were lonely.
They were lonely. They were poor. Walter Benjamin was living in Paris, and he was in exile from Germany. He was unable to find a job. He was trying to write this incredible project. He spent his whole life devising, the project, the arcade project, and nothing came out of it, because he simply didn't have the time, because he had to flee. He had to flee France, and he was planning to go to New York, And in fact, he was planning to go to live to New York, to the same neighborhood I was living in when I was finishing the book. So for me, Walter Benjamin became a kind of a neighbor ghost, because many of his friends were living in the same neighborhood in New York where I was living in.
Yeah, and that is why I think we see the empathy that you have for these writers. You have respect, you have empathy, and that really shines through in the text.
Yeah. That they are like my family, in a sense, because they are creating the modern sensitivity. They are creating the modern view of the world. And they are doing it against all odds, in a society where there is no longer a place for the artist.
True.
So Baudelaire was writing for newspapers who closed down and they didn't pay him anything. You know, it was.
So the other thing is that I felt that the second part of the book, you say your farewell, La Despedida, to New York.
Yeah, you know, this is interesting because the book kept changing all the time during the writing. No? In early February 2017, I decided to spend 2 months in New York, my 2 last months in New York, no? To go back to New York for 2 months in order to try to find out what to make of the book, no?
Yeah.
In order to give it a definitive shape. No? But then what happened was that the fact of being in New York, no, filtered into the book, into the writing of the book, no? And very slowly it became, as you said, you perfectly foresaw, it became an unexpected farewell to the city, because I was aware that these were my last weeks and days in the city I had been living for many years, and I was very much attached to. No? So it came up to the very end. The book kept giving me surprises, no? In the way it came along. No?
So when you mention cities, a very pedantic question as to which would be your favorite city?
You know, monogamy, I'm very fond of monogamy as a person. No, I'm a vocational monogamous man, no, for many years. No, but I think that you can practice a polygamy of cities, no, in a sense. No?
If it's a wandering Jew, he's going to.
I only need to love one woman, but I can perfectly love different cities.
Different cities in different times.
Yeah. So,
and it's such a coincidence you're in Lisbon right now in the winter. So
Lisbon is one.
Lisboa.
Lisbon is one of the cities I mean, I am very responsive to the place I find myself in, you know. I immediately, when I get to a place, I try to absorb everything about the place, you know. I cannot stay in Lisbon and do the same things I do in Madrid, no?
Madrid,
so
yes.
I love cities, no? I am a lover of cities. I feel very strongly, I had a very strong sense of the places I am in, you know?
Okay.
And this is something that has happened to me since the very beginning of my career, if you can call it a career.
So the novel also somewhere I got a slight impression that your first novel, El Robinson Urbano, you see shadows of that also in this. Over there, the protagonist changes forms.
Absolutely. That was so, here, you know, the Robinson Urbano was a collection, it was not a novel, was a collection of short literary,
yes.
But they were very literary pieces. And some of them had some elements of fiction into them. No? So, but at the beginning of this series of pieces, no, that eventually became a book, no, they were published weekly in a daily newspaper. No, at the beginning was the dazzlement, the surprise, the beauty of contemplating the city you are living in as if you were a foreigner. No? At the time I was living in Granada, no? and Granada was the city of my life. That was where I had my job, I had been to university, I was married, I had my children there. But Granada, all the same, rings a very powerful universal bell, because Granada is a kind of romantic city. No? So the thing was, I was walking in Granada and I was seeing myself as a foreigner visitor in the city, no? As any of the romantic visitors that came to Granada in the 19th centuries. That's why the book, after so much back and forth, the book, To Walk Along in the Crowd, ends up in Granada. ends up in the memories of my first discovery of the city as a suitable literary material for my inspiration.
So when you're talking of the city, so I get the feeling that this novel now, going back to it, A Walk Among Walk, is actually not just a novel, it's actually a travelogue as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are no longer strong borders between genres.
Between the two.
Yeah, because it is a novel, since there is a fiction narrative, there are fiction characters. It's also a travelogue. Many novels have this element of travelogue in them. No, you think of Don Quixote de la Mancha, for example. It's a beautiful travelogue of the region of La Mancha. No? So I'm perfectly comfortable with doing different things into a single book. No.
Yeah. So therefore, you have a biography, an autobiography, a travelogue, all built into this one novel.
Why not? I mean, you can even use it as a manual to walk in New York, because the second part of the book, it is the description of an actual trek, you may call it, since South Battery in the southernmost tip of Manhattan, all the way up to the Bronx, where Allan Poe's house is. No? So you can follow my steps. No, you can follow exactly
the steps.
So there is not only a novel and a travelogue, but a practical guide to move around in the city. No?
City, true. So when you're talking of cities, what is your impression of the modern city?
You know, the cities are becoming very, very merciless places, no? This is something that has happened I mean, aside from the urban beauty and everything, the fact is that cities like Madrid or New York or Paris or Lisbon are becoming merciless, unequal places, because they are expelling regular people, no? They are becoming cities for the rich. No, they are becoming gated communities for the rich, no? So immigrants, the poor, and Black people and marginal people are pushed away because they simply cannot afford to pay rents. No,
yes.
For example, New York in the 60s, in the 70s, was a very unsafe city. It was very insecure and dangerous, but at the same time, it was very cheap. So many artists could come to New York, many artists and workers and people, working class people. No, this no longer is possible. So this is happening also here in Lisbon. No? I mean, the rents are so high that the regular people, middle-class people, cannot afford them. So what kind of cities are we creating? These are cities for the rich and for tourists. No, this is the sad things about cities now. So nevertheless, I love them.
So they are collecting garbage and throwing out people.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So your novel, a lot of people may not have yet read it, and I would suggest that they do, since the English is easily available now in India. It is a novel of 422 pages, and yet, you know, people with the today's generation, especially, who are used to the 128 characters on Twitter, even they are going to be taken in. They're going to get enganchados. Hooked to it. So is this style of writing that you had, was it keeping your readership in mind, or was it because of the material that you were using, that there are really short sentences, tacos sentences, you don't have long paragraphs, nothing like that? Because in Spanish and Latin American literature, from, you know, reading Marquez and others, you do realize that the sentence structures are very, very long in a lot of the novels.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you wanted to do this very consciously, or was it dictated also by the structure and the material that was available?
No, absolutely. It was dictated by the material itself. No, I mean, you cannot plan to write in order to satisfy some potential readership, no? So it comes, no? It has to be. I think that writing a book is mainly to find a music, to find a certain kind of music, no? You listen to this music, no? And the moment you start writing the first lines, that's why the first sentence in a book is so important, no? Because it somehow it sets the tone for the writing, no? And this book had to have a kind of rhythm of hip hop thing about it, no? I mean, it had to be short sentences, it had to be a very strong rhythm, because this is what the very material demands.
Reality is also.
And then there is also that when I was young, and I was always reading Garcia Marquez and the great Latin Americans, no, I was so, and also I was a great reader of Proust, no? So I tended to write very, very long sentences as well, no? And then you know what happened to me? I went to live to the US, and I plunged myself into English writing, into the rhythms of the English language, no? And I think that this kind of experience is very useful for a Latin, Spanish or Latin American writer, no? Because it gives you an awareness of doing shorter things, of being clearer, or being up to the point, no? I mean, this is very healthy and you who are a translator, you know perfectly well, no? The balance you have to keep between languages, no? But this is, for me, this learning, this trying to live in a different language, no? And has had a very deep influence in my writing, no? In my evolution as a writer. No?
Thank you. And I must say that the translation is also a fantastic translation.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah,
it has just, it has the complete flavor of the original.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, and my compliments to the translator.
His name is Guillermo Blechmar, no? It's important to say his name.
The translator.
Because, yes. I'm absolutely in favor of putting the names of translators in the place they deserve. No?
Yes. And thank you so much, Mr. Molina, for being with us today and sharing your thoughts on the novel with us. And we look forward to having you in India very soon, hopefully.
And I hope to walk.
And yes, and we hope to translate this book into Hindi and bring it to our Indian readers, and have them get a glimpse of this fantastic book that we have managed to read. Some of us have, and we hope.
Let me tell you, I'm very grateful for your very generous reading, very generous and smart reading of the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Molina. Thank you, Jaipur Literature Festival, for having us here, for giving us this opportunity to talk. And I hand it over to Judith.
Thank you, Antonio and Maneesha, for this splendid session. And thank you, Instituto Cervantes, for your support. On behalf of all of us at Teamwork Arts, thank you all for being such a great audience. Good night.
May I ask you a question?
And stay
safe. Where does your last name come from?
My last name comes from Portugal. So I'm from Goa. But
that was what I was thinking. Yeah. There is a beautiful restaurant near my apartment, which is called Sabor.